Media Literacy Conference of the Americas. Thank you for being here with us today. Bienvenidos a todos y a todas. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos hoy en este día. My name is Mary Guzer, and I will be the moderator for this session. I also happen to be the Deputy Director of Educational Video Center. This session is entitled A Youth in the Heights, a Youth Participatory Action Research and Eco-Media Literacy Project in New York City, Washington Heights. Please note this session is recorded. If you are under 18 years of age or prefer not to be recorded, please turn off your video and remove your full name for anonymity. Joining us today to lead this discussion and presentation are educators and project leads Anthony Voulgarides and Meryl Feigenberg. We also have the privilege of being joined today by a youth producer crew from the project and Educational Video Center's Executive Director, Embreen Qureshi. You can see Anthony and Meryl's bios in the chat. As we move through the presentation, the presenters will tell you more about themselves and their work. We will begin with presentations describing the project. You will then see a film created by our youth producers, and we will follow with a Q&A and dialogue discussion. Please feel free to add your questions throughout the presentation into the chat function. And now at this time, we're going to kick things off, and I'm going to pass the mic to Anthony.
All right, welcome everybody. So we're just going to take a couple minutes as folks trickle in. If you would please drop in the chat your institution or organization that you're with, your role, and your location. Just take a moment in our Zoom chat to drop in your organization, role, and location.
Kevin Rosario, he runs the cab company, he struggles in the barrio. See, his daughter Nina's off at college, tuition is mad steep, so he can't sleep. Everything he get is mad cheap.
Good morning, Usnavi.
Pan caliente, café con leche.
Put $20 on today's lottery.
Okay, must be a lucky day.
Gotta be.
Oh my God, you're so excited.
My Nina flew in at 3 a.m. last night.
Sweet. Abuela's been cooking all week.
Compay, when I see you this weekend, are we gonna eat?
So then Yesenia walks in the room. She smells sex and she perfume. It smells like one of those trees that you hang from the rear view. I know. It's true. She screams, who's in there with you, Julia?
Daniela.
Grabs the bat and kicks in the door.
Carla.
So big shout out to Steve Goodman, CVC's founding executive director, who's we see in the room. Welcome, Steve. Thank you for coming and watching our presentation today.
All right, folks. So you'll see today, we're going to run things a lot like we run class at our school. And so we're going to get things kicked off. If you haven't already dropped your name, organization, role, and location into the chat. One thing we want to do is help connect each other today. So thank you, everybody who has already dropped that in. And we're excited to share our learning with you today. So our title of our project is In the Heights, a participatory action research project and eco-media literacy project in Washington Heights. I am Anthony. I'm a teacher at Washington Heights Expeditionary Learning School in New York, and I'll pass it over to my co-facilitator.
Hi, everybody. My name is Meryl Feigenberg. I am a media coach at the Educational Video Center in New York. And this is the project that Anthony and I worked on together this spring.
Also with us, we're featuring today our students, so I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Jen. I'm an NYU student, and I am a 2021 Wheels alumni.
Hi, my name is Thais. I'm a first year at Brown, and I graduated from Wheels in 2021, and I'm currently at Providence.
Hi, my name is Iovani. I'm a student at the University of Chicago, and I'm a 2021 Wheels alum.
Hi, my name is Ashley, and I'm a student at Smith College, and I'm also a 2021 Wheels alumni.
So shout out to our students who are taking time out of their first year college to help us present today. So they were seniors last year at Wheels. So we always start with a learning target at our school. So today, this is what we're looking for. I can identify how media literacy and community partnerships can help drive meaningful change. And we also want you to be able to transfer learning to your own context. So I see we have some students in the house. We got some folks from some great organizations in the house. So we want this to be useful for you. So we encourage you to, engage with us on the chat. I'll turn it over to Meryl to walk through our guiding questions.
Yeah, so these were some questions that we were thinking of throughout this project that we also hoped that you would think about as well from this presentation, and how you can bring it into your own work as well. So how can we empower youth to be change makers in their own communities? How can we leverage strategic community partners to make learning authentic and drive meaningful change? And how can we use critical media literacy to understand intersections of race, class, and equality? And so we'll come back to these questions at the end of the presentation and hear your thoughts, if you have them, about some of these questions, but just to throw them out there for now as we get started.
So as Mary outlined, we're kind of ending our opening part now. We're going to go into our main learning, thinking about how partnerships and media literacy can help drive change. Then we're going to turn it over to our students who are going to screen their film that they made last year and answer some questions from you. So we really want you to think about any questions you have as you are listening to what you, as you're listening, so that you can ask us. We'll have a few minutes at the end. So what we did at our school is, we're really thinking about how we're partnering with who we have right here in our own community. Today, we're talking about one partnership in particular, and that's between Wheels, the school that our students are from and that I teach at, and Educational Video Center, a local organization here in New York City. So we're going to kind of zoom in on that partnership to kind of think about how we can leverage partnerships and media literacy to, do great work in our communities. And so just a little bit about Wheels. We are a pre-K through 12th grade school in Upper Manhattan. We have a student body that is mostly made up of primarily immigrant families, many of which are from the Dominican Republic. Washington Heights is known as Little DR, as you may or may not know. We also have about 1/4 of our students have disabilities of some kind, learning disabilities, so about 25%. And we're, about 85 to 90% free lunch. So, our community you'll hear more about later from our students. But we are a pre-K through 12 public school in Manhattan. And so we are, oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong slide deck here. Our curriculum is based on a learning expedition. So the work we do is very interdisciplinary and project-based. We often aim to use authentic audiences and authentic processes when we do our work. We try to keep things relevant and making real-world connections and doing celebrations of learning at the end so our students can have a place to share their learning. And we like to leverage community partnerships and expertise in our work. And our curriculum is driven through local issues. So we'll see a picture of this in just a moment. This was during a pandemic year that this project happened. And so we leaned even more heavily on these aspects of a learning expedition, but we do this also on a daily basis in the normal year as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Meryl, who's going to introduce Educational Video Center.
Yeah, and I'm going to quickly turn it over actually to Ambreen, who we have here, who's the executive director from EVC, to introduce her and the organization a bit.
Thank you so much, Meryl and Anthony. Thank you everyone for joining us for this session. My name is Ambreen Qureshi. I'm the Executive Director of the Educational Video Center. For those of you not familiar with EVC, we're a youth media, arts education, and social justice organization based in New York City. For almost 4 decades, EVC has been teaching documentary filmmaking as a means to develop the artistic, critical media literacy, and career skills of young people. Our work is rooted in critical pedagogy and youth participatory action research. We teach young people like the incredible youth from Wheels who are here with us today to read the world so that they can transform it. I'm going to pass the mic back to the team so you can hear from them about the work that they did together.
Okay, so this project is rooted in our expedition, and no one's more familiar than our students. So sorry to interrupt you, Thais. There you go. I'm going to let Thais and Jen take it over from here.
With support from our nonprofit partner, another one of our partner organizations, Friends of Wheels, students are working to transform the built environment of 182nd Street into a hub for community-powered environmental and climate justice action that integrates arts and culture in Washington Heights.
Sorry about that. Through this initiative, corridor youth leaders are working to provide more than 100,000 people access to the Harlem River and otherwise off-limits areas, as well as High Bridge Park, which is our anchor park, while also connecting the dots between youth leadership, education, climate, and environmental justice. The 6 schools as seen that are on the slide are located on 182nd Street and can utilize the corridor as a learning space for students. The corridor would also improve the access to open and green spaces for residents and allow them to use it as a space to hold events and to celebrate the community's culture.
Our project focuses on the idea that we can build a safe, clean, and healthy community by remaking 182nd Street. Our community of Inwood and Washington Heights is mainly a low-income immigrant Latinx community where asthma, diabetes, and cancer rates are high. Clean air is an urgent issue in our neighborhood. According to the Community Air Survey in 2016, our community was among the New York City neighborhoods with the poorest air quality. This is unsurprising, given that the George Washington Bridge, Henry Hudson Parkway, Harlem River Drive, and I-95 all bring substantial car traffic through the neighborhood as seen on this map, and everything's labeled.
Corridor youth leaders have already begun to remake the street. We have been installing tree guards, cleaning up the Wheels gardens, and studying the traffic, air quality, and urban heat islands in our neighborhood. Now, I will pass it on to Mr. Voulgarides to talk about how the senior expedition class expands upon the work that has been done.
Okay, so just to be clear, thank you, students. This has been a multi-year project, really trying to remake the street in front of our school into a green space, an open pedestrianized plaza. And this is not a quick process. It's been a few years that we've been working on it. And we're really trying to do project work to continue the momentum that these students have started, so that this is living beyond when the students leave and go off to college. They teach students younger than them to keep the project going. And so last year during our pandemic year, we really did a deep dive into the idea of environmental justice. And so in the fall, we asked students to look at some of the statistics and facts and research out there around our neighborhood, and got students think about who should be protecting the environment in our local community. And so they came up with these argumentative synthesis essays and took a position on who is really responsible. A lot of that work yielded that were many factors. There's the government, students, community members, so forth. Then in the spring of last year, winter into spring, students did individualized research projects on their topic of choice within the umbrella of environmental justice, kind of becoming experts on a single issue. And then we brought everybody back together, and in teams of 4, students chose one issue to focus on. And with the help of EVC, we're able to create a film about that issue so that they can start to share that learning and expertise with their community. And so we ask questions like, how healthy is my community? What is my role in ensuring our community's health? How can we use scholarly research and argument to drive change? And how can you take action for issues that you believe in? And student teams chose a range of different issues, everything from housing conditions to the lack of green space, to urban heat, to climate justice. And they made these films. We made about 20 different films across our student body, one of which you're going to be able to see today. And so the concept of an interdisciplinary expedition is that we leverage expertise. So in the English classroom, we thought about argument and how we're using evidence, how we're crafting claims, how we're organizing, presenting information. But then we brought in experts that Meryl's going to talk about in just a moment, thinking about, film craft, things like shot types, rule of thirds, setting up an interview. And so I'm going to turn over to Meryl, who's going to walk us through some of our, like a day in the life of our expedition.
Yeah, so we, I came into the ELA class anywhere from 2 to 4 times a week for a period of weeks, and each day was kind of had a different theme of what we were going through in terms of the film craft. So we're going to look at some examples from one day. So here we have, just like we showed you the learning targets for this session, there would always be learning targets for our class. And so this one was about setting up film for an in-person or Zoom interview and using composition techniques. So what we started with, and this is not the whole lesson, but some slides from it, we focused on a film that I worked on with another group of students a couple years back. And that was kind of our baseline film that we kept returning to, that we were studying. So we watched a clip of it. They had already seen the entire film, and we thought about and had students responded about what they noticed visually about the interview. So about the composition, about the shot, how did the students frame this interview? And then we went through, you can go to the next slide, Anthony. We went through, these were all the things that we talked about that we needed to think about when we were getting ready for an interview. And because this was a pandemic year, we were talking about both in person, but also Zoom interviews for people or students who couldn't meet in person. So location, or yeah, well, I just highlighted some of them. So where you're going to do the interview, how you're going to light it, what your lighting situation is, how you are framing it in the camera, how you're recording it either on your, we mostly used cell phone videos as the video cameras, or over Zoom, how you hold the camera, the different roles that the crew or the film team had, and then the etiquette for conducting an interview, which these students, a lot of whom I think had already conducted interviews, they kind of knew this, but we went over it anyway. So here's an example of lighting and talking about if you're if you're filming indoors or if you're on Zoom, or whether you're filming outdoors, and how to kind of make use of what you have in your house, or just the light outside. And we talked about some different compositions and some framing techniques. And one really common one in film and photography is the rule of thirds. And so just to see what that looks like. And we had students asking questions and commenting on what they were noticing as well as we went along. And then different kinds of framing for an interview. So here's an example of the 2-shot frame. We took a look at this image, and students in the Pear Deck, which is kind of a version of a chat if you don't know it, responded to these questions, and we had a little conversation about what do you notice about the shot, what kind of relationship is being created between the interviewer and the interviewee in this shot, and as the director, why you might want to frame your interview with this shot. And then we talked a little bit about framing over Zoom. You know, whether you're just doing a spotlight like we're doing now, or whether you have everybody on the in the frame, whether they're speaking or not, and that everybody should be on the camera when they're doing it. And lastly, we ended every class with a workshop time. And so the workshop time would give students at least 30 minutes, sometimes it was longer, to practice what we had talked about during the class. So on this day, they met in their groups every day. They came back in breakout rooms with their small film crew of anywhere from 3 to 5 students. And they conducted a mini interview, a practice interview in their group. So they did it over Zoom, or some of them were at school at this point, so they could do it in person. And that was the practice to get ready for their interviews with the experts in the field for their films.
Yeah, so, you know, we kind of ran class like we would run in a normal year. We just did it all over Zoom. And, you know, we had many lessons, we had workshop time, and kind of took those elements of project-based learning that we know work, and just kind of converted the best we could over Zoom. And so one thing we always do at our school is celebrations of learning. And in this case, we invited community members, experts, some of the interviewees from the films, teachers, students, parents to our expo. We had over 100 people to come and listen to the students. We screened films. We had a little competition. We had the students talk about their films. And you're going to get a little flavor of that right now, because we're going to pass it over to our student filmmakers, our producers, who are going to walk us through the film they chose, why they chose it. They're going to screen their film, and then we're going to have a chance to ask them questions. So as you think of questions, feel free to jot them down. Feel free to drop them in the chat, because we will have some time to talk. So I'm going to turn it over to our students.
Okay, hello. So my group and I chose tenant rights and substandard housing as a topic for our film.
We chose this topic because many of the people, including us, live in an environment where there are cracks on the walls, the steam pipes leak, and the roof is nearly falling. We live in apartments where our health has been threatened because displacing residents is the ultimate goal. After we had a Socratic seminar in one class period where we spent more than an hour trading stories of horrible apartment conditions and landlords taking advantage of us, we were mad at how normalized this was in our community. This is an example of environmental injustice because it shows how communities of color, such as ours, live in apartments with safety hazards and indoor pollutants that lead to a number of damaging health conditions. We want to advocate for the tenants' rights so that the residents are informed of the resources available to them to fight back against this environmental injustice and live a better quality of life.
The most rewarding part of making the film was filming the in-person interviews. We've done a lot of interviews before for colleges, programs, and internships, but we've never been the interviewer who was asking the questions. We also learned a lot of information about crafting thoughtful interview questions, and it was interesting to interview a variety of different people who've experienced substandard housing conditions and experts who've also worked on the legal side of it.
The most challenging part of creating the film was creating the storyboard, because it was difficult for us to imagine what the final film would look like. As we progressed on making the film, we had to constantly go back and make revisions. For example, we originally had in our storyboard that we wanted to film a lot of residents for an interview about their housing conditions. However, since we were on one of the peaks of COVID, we did not consider the fact that some people did not want to take the risk of catching COVID. Thus, we ended up interviewing fewer people than we initially planned for.
At the end, one thing that we took away from the filmmaking process was that creating a film requires good communication from the entire team. Every team member had to be there so that we could divide the work and talk about when we would film B-roll shots, who can interview or create the interview questions, how we would edit, and etc. At the beginning, we struggled because we didn't communicate very well with each other about our film, which affected our progress. However, once we started communicating more and working together on Zoom calls, we were able to effectively collaborate on the film and make our film as close to our initial vision as possible.
Okay, are we ready to screen? Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Mary/Meryl, who's going to screen our film.
The spokeswoman went on to say the building had 150 open housing maintenance code violations. 3 weeks ago, we told you how the disabled senior and other tenants in this 5-story Washington Heights building have struggled for several months without a working elevator. And since then, the building owner hadn't taken steps to correct the problem. Tenants still have no gas.
It took you guys to come over here and put pressure on them for them to be able to even start the work.
Race, class, and income determines a person's access to clean, safe, and affordable apartments. Washington Heights is one of the neighborhoods with the largest number of severe quality housing problems that threatens the health and safety of the residents.
¿Cuáles son algunas de las preocupaciones que tiene sobre su apartamento?
Ejemplo, agua caliente, entran ratas, en invierno no dan calefacciones. A veces no limpian el edificio, que bastante peleo y reclamos.
One time my brother was in the bathroom and the roof kind of disintegrated on top of him. He got hurt and we had to go to the hospital.
There was once a time in my house we were sleeping and the heater just started smoke just started coming out.
Well, a couple of years ago I was living in a 3-bedroom apartment. And it definitely had roaches. The water was brown at one point.
I'm scared because I worry someone could burn themselves with the hot water since it's patchy, or if the holes could injure my mom or sister while walking.
In an effort to push out tenants and speed up the process of gentrification, landlords are allowing their buildings' conditions to deteriorate, not caring about those affected. They are valuing money over our health and safety.
A lot of times we aren't the first priority.
It was already too late. Somebody had already gotten hurt.
It's probably because he wants us to leave.
Nothing ever got done.
I don't want to see my mom or sister suffer.
In NYC, Black and Hispanic renters face a disproportionate amount of inadequate housing conditions in their apartments. Historically, landlords have systematically oppressed minority renters and threatened tenants with eviction if they spoke about their poor living conditions. As a result, many tenants remain in their unsafe apartments. But it is not their only option. By law, tenants are entitled to have a safe and comfortable living space.
And there's also laws like the Housing Maintenance Code, which requires that a landlord provide suitable conditions in all housing, whether it's a room or whether it's a rent-stabilized apartment or whether it's a New York City Housing Authority apartment.
Under the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act of 2019, tenants have the right to a livable, safe, and clean apartment. This is called the warranty of habitability. If your apartment does not have heat or hot water regularly, then your landlord has violated the warranty of habitability. Landlords must keep their apartments and the public areas in good repair, clean, and free of pests, garbage, or other waste. Informing residents of their rights can help them advocate for themselves and prevent their landlords from abusing their power.
The greatest thing you can do, honestly, is you can call 311 if you're having some housing trouble and be connected to a legal service provider. Meaning that if you are dealing with a situation with your landlord and you don't really know what to do, like, do you leave, do you stay, how do you get the rats out of your apartment? All of these kinds of questions can now be answered with a lawyer. So tenants now in New York City have a right to an attorney in housing matters. It also means that they have a right to call certain hotlines and ask questions.
Washington Heights is home to all of us. Immigrants, people of color, Latinx. It's unjust that our community is subjected to living these terrible living conditions as if our quality of life is less valued than white people's. Many of these residents in our community are being pushed out of their apartments by their landlords due to poor maintenance. We will not stand for low quality housing that endangers our safety and health. The fight for environmental justice starts with all of you watching this video. If our landlords or local government do not hear us, we will make ourselves be heard. Organize with your neighbors. If you feel like you are being taken advantage of, call 311 to connect with an attorney and other resources. The change starts now.
All right, so thank you, Jen, Thais, Giovanni, and Ashley for sharing your film. We're gonna get started with some Q&A. So this is an opportunity for you to unmute yourself. You're welcome to turn on your cameras if you're able to, and ask our students questions about how they made their film, what was the experience like, anything that they would like to take away from it. I'm going to get us started with kind of the first question, and then we'll open it up to our audience. So the first question is just thinking about, I haven't seen these seniors in a few months. They've gone off to their first year of college. And so I'm kind of curious how your experience is working on this project or other work around the corridor at Wheels kind of helped shape your current interests in your first year of college. How have you used this?
I can start. So at school, I had the opportunity to learn about environmental justice through my work at the Cleaner Green Corridor. And I really enjoyed being a driving force of change in our community's environment. And it was really interesting to learn the history behind it as well. Because of my previous work, it inspired me to currently major in urban and environmental studies. And through my major, I want to learn how to better advocate for my community's environment and kind of continue on the work that I started in high school.
Thanks, Giovanni. And so we'd like to invite anybody, if you have any question about films, we have our student producers here to answer. feel free to just unmute yourself and shoot, or if you're not able to do that, you can drop your question in the chat and we'll read it out loud.
I have a question, but it isn't about the films alone. It's a sort of broader question about the students' educational experience in media, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
Great. So I just started a brand new job at a K through 12, pre-K through 12 school that is trying to formalize its media literacy curricula. The position is literally 3 months old. And one of the things I'm looking into everywhere I can is the question of all the things young people, especially those who are, for instance, starting university and college lives, have learned about studying media. Are there any particular lessons, ideas, structures that stand out where you look back and say, when I was in 4th grade, when I was in 7th grade, when I was in 11th, it doesn't matter, any time in your education, what are the things you learned about how media work that have really made a difference in how you see the world? What are the standout lessons or fields of study from your own last 12 years of education?
I think that we didn't learn a lot about media until senior year, I think, or at least film production. We didn't get a chance to record our own films before or edit it. This is our first, this is the first time we were exposed to that type of work. And I think it should start earlier. If it started earlier, we would have been more familiar, early on in education, at elementary, middle school, and high school. But I'm glad we were exposed to this before we went off to college, because I learned a lot about what goes into a film and what would make it powerful. When Meryl was talking about her lessons on interview shots and B-roll and everything like that, and then our group had to think about what would make something impactful for the audience, what would make them emotional. We have to make the audience feel like they're living, they know what our lives are about just from a short amount of time that we had. So yeah.
Any other students want to add on to that?
I can add on. I want to add on that, I feel like the most important thing that I've learned throughout this process was to know who your audience was, especially now since I'm taking a film class in my first year. And because of what we learned throughout senior year, I'm able to look at our films that we're viewing and be like, oh, they're doing this because their target audience are POCs, or they're doing this because they want to make the viewer look intimidated and everything. So I feel like knowing who your audience is was a very important tip that we got.
Other questions? I know, I can keep going with that one as well. Is there anybody else who has a question for our panel?
Yeah, I had a question concerning the film production itself, particularly the music near the end, when you were showing those slow moving shots of individuals and there was commentary over it, but the music underneath I found was very moving. And I just am curious as to how you developed that, or how you came to those kinds of choices, and what kind of discussions you had about making those choices. Because I think if you were to look at that without the music and then with the music, it'd be different, right? And so I'm curious about your thought process that went through that, if you might comment. Thank you.
I could answer this one. So as we were discussing the film, we wanted to we talked about what our ultimate goal is. And it was to, make a change because we all experienced these type of living conditions and we were tired of it. We wouldn't want anybody else to like experience it. So we decided to make our statement to inspire other people to stand up with us and to join our movement to like stop these poor living conditions. So we decided to include some music that is inspiring, and it took us I would say a while to find just one particular piece that actually is able to fit into the film. So I would say that it was it was difficult to find it, but we feel as though it's very effective in what we wanted it to do.
I want to add on that it was like a lot of trial and error. Like we would search up videos, we would put it in, we would like do all that work of like downloading it and then putting it in the film and making it right. And then when we watch it back, we're like, this didn't give us the emotion we wanted. We need to like go back and redo that. And we would have that conversation together of like what that would sound like.
I'd also like to add on. I think one day Meryl was gonna like show our film to the entire class, and the night before she viewed our film, and then like the music choice in the beginning was different, and then when we started to show the film in class, she was surprised because we changed it completely, but it was really just the music. So I guess that shows that the music was really important and it took a long time.
I mean, just speaking a little bit to the process, we try to, with project-based learning, but also just with, our writing or things we're doing, leave that time for the revision process and the critique process. And so in a lot of ways, the work that EVC, does really leans in on that idea of critique. Like try it out, see what response you get, maybe change it up, and building in that space for the revision and that conversation. Because, I mean, how many times did something change in your film, would you say? I mean, a lot, right?
Yeah, like we said, we went back to our storyboard a lot of times.
Great.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, but as Ashley said, we spent a lot of time in class too, both myself and Anthony and the other teachers looking at their films. We encouraged them to keep returning to watch their films over and over. And we looked at each other's films in class a lot, so that there was a lot of critique and feedback happening, both like at these various levels, to get different kinds of feedback and from different groups of people.
I just want to congratulate the students and the whole team for a really powerful project. And as a former resident of Washington Heights, I know how much this is needed to look at the issue of housing. My question is, sort of looking at the work of Paulo Freire and the idea of critical media literacy that kind of focuses on questions of power and how media can be used to empower people or disempower. I'm wondering for the students if you could talk at all about how this experience might have changed your thinking in some way about when you had the power to have the camera or edit or tell a story. What changed for you in your thinking about power and media?
So something that we had to like consider when we were like filming the movie was kind of like who we are as like filmmakers and like our relation to the problem. So like kind of like the power that we have in the situation, and we're kind of like, in a way, we kind of represent sort of our audience as well, since we're residents of Washington Heights who've constantly like lived in these poor housing conditions. And it wasn't a little bit more of a personal issue. So I guess something that we learned related to power and filmmaking was that it's best to give the most like honest, like I guess the most honest perspective on issues, because we kind of have like the power to represent ourselves the best and talk about these issues the best. So I'm proud of the way that we were able to like represent like the housing conditions in Washington Heights and create an accurate story of what's going on, because I feel like a lot of people don't know much about that.
Thank you.
We have about
Charles?
5 minutes. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I was gonna add on that, like that reminds me of one of the guiding questions of who has the power in our communities. And like when you guys first introduced the film project, I was like, we can't do this. Like it's a whole film. Like we've never done video stuff before. And then as we were getting into the project, I was like, who better to do this than us? Like since we've lived through it, our families have lived through it. Like if we give the power to someone outside the community, they're gonna misrepresent it or they're not gonna get the right message across. But because we have lived through it, we're the only ones who can do the topic justice.
All right. We have a few minutes left before we kind of move into our larger discussion or debrief. Is there any other questions from our audience about the project, about the process? If not, we can kind of move into kind of a larger discussion. So, are you able to see my screen? Great. So, when we came up with this project and kind of this work and this presentation, we're really trying to think about like, how can we empower youth to be change makers? How can we leverage community partners to make learning authentic and drive meaningful change? And how can we use media literacy to help understand these intersections of race, class, and inequality? And so I just want to invite anyone from the audience to, think about your current context and maybe where are you going to start? And this could be for any of our students here. This could be for any of our students out in the audience. I notice a lot of students are here. How do you see these questions in your own context? We want to just hear and connect. This is a space for us to connect and see what connections are out there. So I'd like to invite anyone who'd like to unmute yourself and talk about any of these or pose any other questions to our larger group. We want this to be as interactive as possible.
And in the context of the format and structure of the class that that we're following a bit, this would also be the time that we'd have like a workshop time. And maybe we'd go into breakout rooms and we'd have some conversation in small groups and we'd come back and have a larger conversation. So this is obviously just a starting point because we don't have all of that time. But we also encourage that hopefully this can be a starting point for all of you to make some connections outside of here as well and continue these conversations and to just get the conversation going in here. Yeah, thanks for dropping your email in the chat, Lucas. Wonder if you have anything that you'd like to start now. If you have ideas or some thoughts to these guiding questions. And of course, anybody else.
I don't want to be a dominant voice in the conversation, speaking too much. That's why I made sure to put my email address in the chat, because I'd like to talk with anyone interested in any of these things. But I'm certainly interested to know from the adults involved, ways in which community partnerships have developed. I mean, I'm in the city of San Diego, a very large city, not nearly New York size, but top 10 size, where there are lots of entities from nonprofits to long-standing educational institutions of every kind, but where this kind of partnership that, for example, exists between a school and EVC may be a little bit harder to find in some cases. My wife works in a PBL school here in San Diego, and my school isn't technically a PBL school, but that doesn't mean we don't use that kind of connection. So if anyone here has insights or would like to talk further outside of this about finding these rich relationships, all of our cities have plenty of things we need to be working on. And the more we get young people working on them, the better. San Diego homelessness alone could be 10 years worth of serious study and partnerships for any given school. Housing, I can't even begin to talk about the nightmare of housing in some parts of San Diego. So I'm open to hear anything from anybody who works in any of these arenas in education.
A lot of these partnerships come kind of organically out of maybe a relationship that's happened in the school, or something that, for instance, I had been trying to work with EVC for several years. I shot Mary an email years ago about a project, but everything wasn't quite aligned then, and it absolutely took the right moment to find that avenue forward. But like, I would really start with like connectors in the school building, like who's a connector, what is a particular problem, what do the students care about, most. I've often found like what we care about isn't always what the students care about most, and so really starting there as a starting point. I'm curious, Jen or Thais or Giovanni or Ashley, you have any ideas?
Could you repeat the question you were answering? Just so I feel like I'm answering it right.
Oh yeah, I was just curious, like where to start in terms of your own making a project happen, or where would be a natural starting point in some of these larger questions, and also like if any of these other questions you can address as well that are on the screen, kind of in your own experience now, having some distance from the project as well.
I just really wanted to like touch upon, I'm sorry if I pronounced the name wrong, Kateri's question in the chat. And honestly, when I saw that question, it just made me think of like my experience of when I was in high school. So I was in drama club, and it's part of like acting. So to answer like the question as to how one can be integrated in a more authentic way, so like put yourself in their shoes, put yourself in like the community's shoes. In order for you to like know what they're living, what they're experiencing, you need to like be with them. You need to experience what they experience. So I would say like that would be the most authentic way, live their culture, and make sure that like everything that they do becomes part of your life, and you would see their perspective on their issues and everything.
Thank you.
Oh, and to add on to what Jen is saying, I would say also to like know when to listen, the difference between like, because listening could also be very useful. You don't always have to talk to like be a part of the conversation. You can listen and still be a part of the conversation. I feel like the teachers did a great job of that, because whenever we were talking about social justice issues, sometimes like the teachers that were leading the discussion or like gave us the questions were like, they're white and we are people of color. So then we like, they knew when they said it themselves that they would listen because they know that it's not their place to speak. And I really valued that because I felt respected as a student. So I think that's important.
Thank you.
Any last burning questions? We're going to kind of go into our last debrief. We might have time for one more if anybody's interested. Okay, so we want to kind of leave you with some of these ideas, conversations. Make sure we have some great resources in the chat here. We have a Wheels Senior Expedition YouTube. There are many more videos that we would love for you to check out. We also have an Instagram for our Clean Air Green Corridor project. So I'm going to drop those in the chat right now. We're really, trying to make this pedestrian plaza a reality. So the more followers we can get there, the better. I'm also going to, if you're curious more about the actual project, we had a little write-up in our local bilingual newspaper, the Manhattan Times. We'll put the link to that as well. And we have a lot of great things happening in the chat. So I will just want to let you know, thank you all for attending. Thank you for joining. Another big shout out to all our students who came to give a reprise. And so I'll turn it over to Meryl for any last words.
Yeah, just thank you to everybody again. Definitely check out the other films that were made on YouTube. We were really lucky to have these youth producers here to showcase their film. And there are some other great films on there as well about a whole range of topics around environmental justice. So you can see kind of the breadth of the work that was done during this senior project. And I do hope that people are able to continue these conversations and that this was productive for your own work moving forward. And thank you again.
Thank you for coming, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Don't forget to follow us on social media. Take care.